Hey guys, this is Ken Spangenberg, Director of Baseball at MSI, here today with Jarret DeHart, the assistant hitting coach of the Seattle Mariners as of this fall, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thanks for
That's
having me.
awesome. Not a problem. And what else are we going to do? We're all stuck at home, right? So we'll
Yeah,
talk
that's
some
the truth.
baseball. So we have a really interesting cross section of guys here. You know, we have some other professional coaches like yourself. We have some college coaches, some amateur coaches, some high school players, and I'm even seeing a 10E player. So we'll try to give everybody a little bit of information. So we'll kind of be bouncing all over the place, all right?
Awesome.
So let's kick this off, kind of like how these all start. Why don't you give us a little bit of your background, both playing and coaching?
Yeah, so grew up in New Jersey, went to high school there, and then started my college career at LSU. So went there my freshman year, transferred from there to Howard College down in Big Spring, Texas, junior college out there for a year. Then I went from there to Tulane to finish up my college career there and started coaching immediately after that. Finished up my degree as a student assistant, and then after that year, went off with the Mariners and started as an AZL hitting coach there. And then following that, kind of moved into a different role the following year, more of a roving position where I was kind of working with hitters throughout the organization from the big leagues all the way down. And then this year ended up full time in the big leagues. So it's been a crazy last couple of years for sure.
Yeah, seriously. I don't know how I initially we connected or whatever, but it seems like you went from being a college player to an MLB coach like really quickly, and we'll dive into that a little bit more. One thing that was interesting to me is I literally saw you play in high school, which I'm not sure if you're aware of. I recruited a kid, Connor Arsenault, who I think hit behind you in the lineup.
Yeah,
we're going out there and watching him holy crap, this kid can swing it. I'm sure in the recruiting process you had a lot of interest. What eventually brought you to LSU?
Honestly, I committed really early. I committed right after my sophomore spring. So I think it was either the first or second guy in my class to commit to LSU. So it was really early on. Honestly, if I could do it again, I wish I waited longer. Primarily for the fact that I had some tools and I was talented, but I was not ready to play at the SEC level. I wasn't even close, and I didn't realize that until I got there, unfortunately. But one of the things that's tough about the whole college situation is, these decisions are being made so early, and you're evaluating guys purely based on potential for a lot of that, and it's tough to say whether a guy's going to really live up to what you think he's going to be, and that process it's crazy how early it has gotten, but hopefully we move in the other direction a little bit.
Yeah, we'll see. It'll be interesting to see what baseball being shut down for the spring does. Hopefully, like you said, it gives guys a little bit more time to decide on colleges. So for the younger guys in here, what advice would you give them? Guys who are just entering the recruiting process.
Yeah,
you went to a couple schools. So I'm guessing you didn't make, like you said, the best decision right off the bat.
For sure. And if I could do it all over again, I really would have tried to understand. I can't really speak for the academic fit. It's unique to everybody and financially unique to everybody. But from the baseball side, if your goal is to continue your career as long as possible, you need to go to the place where you're going to develop, and that requires you to ask questions. You have to ask, what's the strength and conditioning program like? What do you guys believe in offensively? Are you integrating information from S&C and athletic training with skill work? Things like that are questions that I really wish I asked, and things that can really kind of illuminate what the program is prioritizing, and when it comes to, development, the other piece of it is that you have to play to develop. So you have to go somewhere where you're going to play, and you have to go somewhere where they have good development strategies in place. And that's really the only way you're going to maximize your potential.
Yeah, and I think that's dead on. I think in the recruiting process, and it's completely natural. As a 15-year-old kid, you go to LSU, how do you not want to go there? You see the stadium, you see the facilities, and you just aren't mature enough to ask questions like that.
For sure.
So I completely get that, and I think that's why the transfer rates are 30% or so. When you look at the numbers.
Yeah.
So you made the transition from player to coach. It seems like it was seamless. It just you stop playing and then the next day you're coaching. Is that something you knew you always wanted to do? Is that something that kind of popped up later in your playing career? How did that happen?
Yeah. I really think it was something that I kind of always wanted to do. And I really figured that out when I went to junior college. like I said, my first year at LSU was eye-opening, and I realized, first of all, that I just wasn't that good. And I saw all these guys around me that were, physically I was capable. I was as strong as all of them. I was as fast as a lot of them, but baseball skill-wise, I had a long way to go, and that really set me down this path, this kind of journey of trying to understand the swing and understand hitting and all the nuances of it. And that's where I really kind of discovered this passion for development in that side of the game. And I the transition into coaching, it really did seem natural to me. Even as I was playing, as I was trying to, uncover all these, like I said, these nuances of hitting, and, I was really open about it, and I loved talking to my teammates about it. And I loved trying to help people that were also on that journey, so it really was a natural transition for me. It was seamless, like you said.
Yeah, for sure. Now, social media, I think, has made us all kind of creeps. So we've gotten to follow people that we don't really know, like over through the years. And like you said, I think you were very outspoken with what you believed in. How do you think that that's changed, from the time when did you really get into like diving into the swing and things like that? Was it college? Was it high school?
Yeah, it was college. I mean,
Okay.
going through high school, I had a few hitting coaches, but I never really was exposed to the level of information that I was exposed to when I started down this journey. And it really started with my first summer. After that freshman year, I was playing in Cape Cod, and I had the opportunity to go. I was driving every off day. I would drive up to Nashua to go hit with Bobby Tewksbury. And
Okay.
I read his ebook that going into that summer, and I was so intrigued. It was just, I mean, I had never really been exposed to that mechanical world before. It just opened my eyes to a whole new realm of possibilities and ways to get better. And that was really where the the rabbit hole began that summer.
Yeah, I think that was a lot of guys. I feel like we saw a lot of big leg kicks that summer. I think the ebook came
Yeah,
out like
barrel
right
tips,
in that
leg
like
kicks.
spring. Yeah,
Yep,
that was
for
nuts.
sure. Everybody was Josh Donaldson for a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. So like how do you think you've changed as a coach just from a swing perspective? Like I would say a lot of times you can tell coaches fall into like one bucket or the other. Like we joked about Tewksbury, you might have like a high level pattern, you might have the self organization group. Like where do you think you fall compared to where you were like when you first got into coaching?
Right. So, I mean, I would say swing wise, I think I've evolved quite a bit. And I mean, this goes for all aspects of coaching. I think, there's a quote from Ray Dalio where he talks about, he's saying, if you look back a year from today and don't think that you were incredibly stupid, you probably haven't learned a whole lot. So,
I like that
I try
feeling.
to, I really try to live by that. I think that over time I've, learned more, advanced. And from a swing standpoint, I think my lens has actually gotten less specific. I used to really coach off of a technical model that I thought there was an optimal technical model. And now, over the years, I've kind of reframed my thinking to be more along the lines of there is no perfect technique, but there are advantages that we can create, technical advantages, and I think that's really the way my lens has shifted, less towards creating an optimal movement and more towards creating advantages with that hitter's current capabilities, if that makes sense.
No, that makes a lot of sense. So we have a lot of coaches on here. If I'm a coach and you've been to our facility, players from 10 to 18 years old, what type of environment do you think would be great to create from a hitting standpoint?
I mean, that's a really good question. I think there's a lot of things that go into it. I think the most important thing you can do is, and this is something that I was missing big time as a player, is just really being able to understand the complete picture and view hitting through a holistic lens. I don't know if you experience this, but a lot of people that, when they finish their playing career, it's a weird sensation. You get a very, very different perspective of the game the minute you step out of it. You see it through a completely different lens. And I think I neglected some of the factors that were outside of that mechanical window. I didn't understand the psychology, and I didn't understand that the brain and the body are inseparable. They're indivisible. And, just being able to view hitting through that holistic lens and being able to touch on all the factors that contribute to on-field performance, and there's a lot of them, I would say that environment would be the best one to create, one where everything matters. You're training everything at all times. And, you're really trying to cater to the needs of the individual.
That's awesome. And obviously that's easier said than done.
For sure.
I think one of the more challenging things for me coaching was going from player to being a young coach. And that was at like the D3 college level. So I imagine going from player to young coach at either the minor league or the major league level, so much more challenging. What are some things you took from your playing career that you think has helped kind of make that transition a little bit less difficult for you?
I think the one thing that I've taken a ton of things from my playing career. I think like we're all kind of a culmination of all of our things that we've experienced in our life. And my playing career provided really, really valuable examples for me. And simply because I was always consciously aware and always trying to get better. And I found quickly that some things work and other things don't. But, in terms of being able to coach players that are, being a young coach and working with guys that play at higher levels than you ever played at, I think right now is a time where we're in a unique, environment where players now in this, new age, this technology age where we're all kind of connected, they have a better understanding of what you can provide them. And I think when players understand that you're going to give them good dope and you've got good content, that they don't really care how old you are. They don't care if you played in the big leagues. They don't care if you played professionally. If you can help them advance their career in any way, they're going to be all ears. And I haven't had very many negative experiences so far, in working with guys that are, way older than me and way more experienced than me. And, the thing that seems to be the commonality is just that guys really want to get better. And I know that as a player, I really wanted to get better, and I would have listened to anybody that had advice for me to get better, and I think that's kind of the world we're living in now.
For sure. I think they can smell out the BS pretty quick, or you guys who are just in it for themselves.
Yeah.
So, coming into like your first minor league season, how did you develop relationships with players? Because I'm sure you didn't just walk over to them and be like, no, I think you should try that. Right.
Right. Yeah. And this is the other piece from, my playing career that I really was valuable learning experience for me, was that coaches that show you that they really give a shit, those are the ones that you look back and really can thank, and it's that old saying, I don't know who said it, but people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care, and that really, really stood out to me. When I look back and I think about the guys that made an impact on my career, they were the ones that really, really cared. And they were the ones that clearly had my best interest in mind, and I think when, like you said, players sniff that out immediately. They sniff out selfishness and they sniff out the bullshit. And if they know that you're in it for them and they know that you have good content, it's going to be a good little matchup there.
Yeah, definitely. Now, being a coach, especially like the roving instructor, you weren't just working with players, you were working with other coaches, which I'm sure comes with another set of relationships and trust to build. And again, like I'm sure the age at some point made it a little tougher. How do you handle the quote unquote old school versus new school? Because obviously they're both in baseball right now. Seattle's obviously like much more on the new school end. But I'm sure it's been a difficulty at some point for you.
Yeah, for sure. And I think like there's definitely, it's the old school, new school argument is always, it's funny to me. It's like,
it's dumb.
It's become so polarized, and it's almost political now. It's crazy. And I think that, the money's in the middle ground somewhere between those two, and old school feel and in-game awareness, and even like old school thought in terms of practice. Like there's a lot of good stuff out there. There's some really, really good stuff in the old school. There's a reason that these things have, stuck around for so long. It's because they worked for somebody, and I think that, it is actually interesting. One of our coaches, Roy Howell, he's our AAA hitting coach, and he had a great big league career, very successful. And we were just talking the other day, we were on a call talking about some skill acquisition stuff, and there was a big conversation about random versus block practice. And that's, perceived as a new school idea. And Roy was just talking about when he was playing, when he's growing up, he's talking about his high school days and whatever. And he's like, we would throw to each other. We would try to strike each other out.
Yeah.
Like, well, that's random practice. Is that new school? People have been doing it forever, so I think that there's the polarization that's been created around that is just so ridiculous and so crazy that it's not even really an argument for me. You need both, and I think in terms of the age gap there, I think if you have the ability to communicate in both languages, so to speak, if you can, understand, because there's old school players now that prefer that type of terminology. and that to me, like if you can speak both languages and navigate both worlds, then you're a very valuable asset for any organization.
Yeah, I think you're dead on. I feel like the old school new school thing is just for like social media and to get some retweets and stuff like that.
For sure.
And it's interesting that you said a lot of these things like that we've been doing, whether it's block versus random, like external versus internal, like this stuff has been around forever.
Right.
So it's really interesting to see it being used on one side or the other when it's really just been baseball in it itself. So one thing that we wanted to talk about a little bit more. So you haven't really had a full year in your position, but like going into next off season, what type of work are you going to give your players? Like, what does their off season look like if you had to build the perfect off season for a hitter?
Yeah, if I had to structure an off season for a hitter, I mean, it's very simple. The key thing that I'm trying to address is I want to maximize the things they do well, and I want to address their limiting factors. And it's really that simple. Get better, maximize the things you're good at, and plug the holes, right? So I think that starts with taking that holistic view and being aware, because it's really easy to start digging in the wrong direction when you don't have the ability to assess and understand where your deficiencies actually are. So to me, for any off-season programming, the key is the assessment, because without that, again, like you could potentially start digging in the wrong direction. And, in terms of designing an off-season program for one of our guys, it's really
Can we
important
talk
to
about
us.
the assessment first? Because I think that's like a huge conversation in and of itself. So I'm curious,
for sure.
So assessment-wise, what does yours look like? Is it like FMS? Does it look like the on-base U screen? Is it bits and pieces from a bunch of different people?
Yeah, it's bits and pieces from a lot of different things. With us specifically, our S&C guys are great, and we have all these different departments. But one of the keys to my role last year, I was within the high performance umbrella, which is kind of our athletic training, S&C, all that kind of stuff. And my job was essentially to try to bridge the gaps between all those different departments, so that we can create this kind of holistic view of the player. That our assessment has to take into account psychological factors too. I mean, again, like I said, the brain and the body are indivisible, and I can't begin to assess a guy's movement without understanding the perceptual and cognitive things that are going on along with that. So I mean, and the key for all assessments for me is really working backwards from the game. And when I say that, I mean, if it's not affecting on-field performance, it's a complete non-factor for me. And, and this is where the assessment process can actually get a little bit dangerous, because if you're not coordinated and if you're not integrating all those departments, let's say the athletic trainers identify that the guy's limited with his lead hip internal rotation, let's say. And so, if we look at the in-game movement and we see that it's not hindering him in any way, this could actually be something that's part of why he's good. And if we just looked at it through that reductionist lens of, okay, he's got limited hip mobility, we need to increase his mobility, we could actually make him worse. So that's where the assessment process is huge, but it always has to start with in-game performance and work backwards from there.
That's really cool. Do you mind me asking what kind of technology you use in the assessment?
Yeah, I mean, we use a lot of stuff. We try to, from the hitting side, we try to assess the ball bat body interaction. So we're trying to hit on every piece of the relationship that the hitter has with the ground, with their sequence, and with the bat and the ball. So we're measuring, we're using Rapsodo TrackMan to measure batted ball data. We're using Blast to measure how the bat's moving. We're using KVS to measure how the body's sequencing. And then we're using some force plate stuff to see how they're interacting with the ground. So we kind of have this complete picture of how the athlete moves in the game context.
That's awesome. How often do you retest guys, if at all?
I would say like in the off season, ideally in an off season program, we would reassess pretty frequently, whether it's weekly, bi-weekly, whatever it may be. You can get some noise there. So it's important to not jump to any conclusions with one poor assessment. But yeah, I like to, and the other piece of the assessment is that like, it really should be happening daily, in that we get to watch guys in the weight room every day. I get to see what this guy's hinge pattern looks like every single day. I get to see if there's any abnormalities going into the cage. I get to know what his kind of like movement, capabilities are for that day when he walks into the cage. And I think a lot of the time with the assessment process, people make mistakes, and that, like you said, they assess one time and it could be extremely misleading. And that's where we need to make sure that we're working backwards from the game, number one, and number two, we're assessing on a daily basis the psychological aspect, see how they're moving in the weight room, see how they're moving in their warm-ups, things like that. It should be an ongoing process, really daily.
Yeah, no, I think those are two like huge tips for sure with the assessment. Now you mentioned the psychological aspect. Do you guys have a mental like skills coach? Is that something that you do? Is it kind of both?
Yeah, we have multiple mental skills coaches. Our mental
Cool.
skills department is unbelievable. Our farm director, Andy McKay, was the mental skills coach in the big leagues for the Rockies, and he's as good as anybody I've ever met with that side of the game. And so that's something that we really prioritize. We think it's really, really important. Every time we talk about that stuff, I just think about how badly I needed that because my mental game sucked. It was
it's easy to
terrible.
get caught up on the swing, right? Like that's
yeah.
Tangible. You can touch it. You can see the video. The mental side is completely different.
Yep, for sure.
That's awesome. We're kind of getting off on a tangent here, but do you mind? You said you learned a lot from McKay, and obviously he's really well known, well respected. If you had to name a few things from the mental side that you learned from him that like really jump off the page, what would they be?
I would say a few things that come to mind right away are, first of all, focus of attention. So when you're in the game setting, where is your attention actually focused? Is it internal, external? And like you said, the research is really, really strong for external being superior in pretty much any performance. The interesting thing is that we actually, for long-term skill development, there's very little research to say what's better. But in terms of in the moment, in-game, short-term performance, performing in the now, external is above and beyond the clear, choice. So I think that was a big thing. And then one thing that he talks about a lot is the funnel. He calls it the 15-second funnel, because you think about most sports. So tennis, for example, when you don't have enough time to get internal, you have to be able to be completely focused on the ball and return it, right? And so baseball and golf really are the only two sports, and I guess you could say basketball, free throws. These are the main sports where you're like, you have an opportunity to get internal,
Right.
And so the funnel is essentially a process that all of our hitters work through. It's a between pitch, pre-pitch routine where you have 15 seconds and you're essentially funneling down from the information you learned from that at bat into your external focus at the bottom of your funnel. And so you have some type of trigger that puts you into that external frame of mind, whether it's, looking at the label on your bat, whether it's blowing a breath out towards the direction that you're trying to hit it in. There's a lot of different strategies that people use there, and it's kind of up to the individual, but it's kind of it's seen as a bit of a necessary process within our organization to make sure that you're getting to the bottom of that funnel and getting to your external thought, whatever it may be.
That's awesome. I feel like that's a very clear visual for guys too.
Yeah.
So you can't tell people not to think at all, because then they're not
sure.
making adjustments pitch to pitch, and you give them the opportunity to take all that information, but then they need to keep narrowing it down to like their one, like you said, their one specific external cue. So sorry, we got way off on a tangent. Let's go back to like the off season. So we assess our guy. They go home. What happens next? Or do you want to be working with them? Does that make more sense?
Say that again.
In our make-believe story, do you want these guys to be off on their own, or is it someone that you'd be working with throughout the off season? Maybe that makes more sense.
I mean, if it was someone that I'd be working with throughout the off season, I would say that, I would definitely want to get with, a really good strength coach, really good PT, really good athletic trainer to make sure, and again, that we're all kind of coordinated. The TPI talks a lot about it being like a pit crew, essentially, where, you're all kind of working together to make these adjustments, these little minor tweaks, whether it be from the technical side or from the physiological side. And again, like to me, the key is really just that integration between the departments. Because if you don't have that, you're missing huge pieces of the picture. And, the one thing that I'm desperately trying to avoid is that idea of digging in the wrong direction. I don't want to hammer a guy with technical focus when it's a physical limitation. I don't want to hammer a guy's physical limitations when it's not impacting his on-field performance. So again, like it really comes down to that integration between departments and making sure that you're seeing that whole picture. And so I guess from there, you want me to go into like, I guess how I would program
Yeah,
from
maybe.
there, or?
Yeah, maybe like a daily routine. It's like how you're progressing from day one through the beginning of spring training.
Right, right. Okay. So I guess like I said earlier, the idea is to kind of address all of the aspects. I kind of, to go back a little bit, I kind of like to look at it through this four coactive model, which is taken from Fergus Connolly in the book Game Changer. It's a great book. If anybody hasn't read it, it's a dense one, but a lot of good content in there. And he talks about trying to view the player through this lens of, there's these four coactives. There's the physical, the psychological, the technical, and the tactical. And so for me, we're trying to develop all four of those things simultaneously all the time, but we're going to prioritize different things depending on where we are in the off season and really what your needs are. So I guess, for example, let's say that we have a guy who, has a clear technical deficiency. He's a good mover. He does nothing flags there in terms of like his movement isn't inhibiting him from creating the technique that we're looking for. From there, I would try to prioritize that technical development early on in the off season, which again might require some internal focus. We need to like essentially create awareness of how you're moving currently and then how you want to move. So there's going to be some internal focus there, some low challenge environments. And then as the off season progresses, we're going to try to test that pattern under, chaotic conditions. I want to see if it's going to stand up to the test in the game. And this is another example from Andy McKay. He talks about, imagine walking on a 2x4, right? And you're walking on the 2x4 and it's on the floor. You're going to do it easily, right? But then all of a sudden you suspend that between two skyscrapers, right? And is that movement going to hold up, And so a big thing for me, and this was a big thing that I missed in my playing career, is that anytime we're making changes to movement, we need to make sure that it stands up to the conditions of the game. So I would imagine that towards the end of the offseason, we'd be progressing into a lot more challenging environments, a lot more variability, shift the focus a little more externally to make sure that that movement kind of stays up, kind of passes the test, so to speak.
For sure. So I'm sure all these guys right now are wondering, because I think just the nature of hitting coaches, they want drills, they want fields, that kind of thing. So could you give us some examples of like your low challenge routines, like different devices you use, different fields, cues, whatever?
Right. So I guess depending on what the technical issue is, we always start with like very, very low variability, very low challenge. And I like to get the bat out of their hands. A lot of people, there's an association between the bat and, my swing, what my swing feels like. Right. So by taking the bat out of the hands, you kind of like get to see a little bit more of how this guy just moves in an athletic context and not so much in the actual swinging context. So that's a really good way to kind of try to pattern in new movements, get them to feel, get a sense of that new movement. And then from there, we try to just progress, along different levels of challenge. So for example, let's say, a guy his path is very much down and across. It's not directionally, not working through the middle of the field. He slices, and we see from the in-game data that he has a lot of slice the other way, hook to the pull side. That guy, we can do some get the bat out of his hands, do some really simple movement prep type stuff to get him to feel that direction, get him to feel the moves that he wants his body to make. Then from there, we progress into flips, overhand toss, whatever it may be. And then from there, as the offseason progresses, we'll go into more, add variability, whether it's mixing pitches, adding in machine, all things like that. So it's really just about making sure they have, number one, the ability to differentiate between old movement and new movement, and then being able to challenge that new movement once they have a feel for it in those, relatively low challenge environments. Now we progress to higher degrees of challenge and variability to see if it holds up. And, I would probably have them do whatever drills they were doing off of, the low challenge environment. So for the guy that, let's say the direction's poor, we maybe do some split grip work, and I would have him take that same drill and move it into those challenging environments. So we'll have him do the split grip off of mixed BP. We'll have him do it off the machine, whatever it may be. And so just to make sure that that new pattern is holding up in those new environments.
That's really cool. I like that a lot. Now, how much say does the player have in all this?
Oh, everything. The player dictates everything. And if I can't make a convincing enough case for the suggestions that I'm making, then my suggestions aren't good enough. I think ultimately it's the player's career, and they need to drive the bus always. We're just there to help guide them in the right direction. I'm a huge believer in that we're here just to guide. We're not here to, mold, so to speak. The player does the molding. We just do the guiding.
They're not your guys.
Yeah.
I got
you.
Yeah. No, I think that's really helpful. So when you're trying to create these feels in the very beginning, are you also using like video or mirrors, anything like that?
Yeah, for sure. A lot of video, a lot of mirror work. Mirror work is great. And I think there's a lot of ways to provide feedback in those environments, whether there's ways to use KVS as a feedback tool. Essentially like it gives you a little ring if
Yeah,
you
I've
hit
seen that.
certain positions. So there's ways to provide feedback there without me just saying like, yeah, that's good. Um,
Right.
so there's a lot of ways to do that, but uh, the mirrors are great, video is great, and any type of augmented feedback is good in those situations. In those situations where it's, very low challenge, very low variability, that's the opportunity for the coach to really provide feedback. As you move into those more challenging environments, that's when the drill itself needs to provide the feedback. I can't be queuing a guy up while he's trying to hit 95. It's just it's not reasonable for me to ask that, and it's completely impossible to execute as a player. So I think like, being able to, that's really where your voice comes into play, is those early, low challenge environments. But as we progress to the higher degrees of challenge, we need to make sure that we set up the drill so that it provides the feedback for the player and it's not me just talking.
Yes, no, that's awesome. So we'll go live with our pro guys, usually like late December, early January.
Yeah.
From like your hitting coach lens, how would you want them to approach the at bats? Because it's really interesting because all the guys do something different. Some are super aggressive early to see what they can hit. Some guys literally will not swing the bat for a month.
Yeah.
Is that, I imagine that's something probably helps them, that you're okay with both directions.
Generally, I'm okay with whatever you want to do,
Right.
but I'm a big believer in the fact that you have to at least have the intent to swing.
Okay.
There's, and this is, there's a lot of research on this in terms of why, but when you decouple perception and action, so you're viewing the pitch without the intent to swing, it changes the way you perceive the pitch. This is why everybody stands in on bullpens and it's like, oh yeah, I'm seeing it good right
I
now.
get that.
See
Yeah.
it looks, oh yeah, that looks good. But the minute you have the intent to actually swing,
Right.
it changes, because now you have to anticipate and predict. You're not just reacting. So I think as long as your brain is in a spot where it's anticipating with the intent to swing, then I think any other, whatever they want to do works.
That's awesome. It's really interesting. Sorry. So as we're getting closer to, actual spring training, what does like the day in the life look like for the guys during the spring training?
Yeah, so I would say, again, like it really comes down to making sure that you're hitting on all four of those coactives, but you're like restructuring the priority. So
Right.
there's going to be some technical shaping, there's going to be some movement prep, there's going to be some low variability work to make sure that the technique is in place. And then from there, the majority of our work will shift from internally focused technique based work to, as we get to spring training, now it becomes very, very high challenge and as game like as possible. So the day in the life really is just, it doesn't change a whole lot. You're still hitting those four buckets, but you're just shifting your priorities around to make sure that, you're really, really emphasizing the tactical, the game focus, and the psychological aspect of, dealing with pressure, dealing with challenge, dealing with that performance anxiety, things like that. Those things have to be prioritized over just swing technique, but you're still hitting a little bit of technique every day.
Right, for sure. Now, how do you? I think it's awesome that you have a good relationship with all these coaches and you're working with all of them. As a player, that might get overwhelming hearing from like 3, 4, 5 different voices. How do you guys, I guess, sync all together? Because I can see that being difficult.
Oh, definitely. It's really difficult. And that's, I think that philosophically you have to be on the same page. You have to believe in the same general principles. But outside of that, I do think there's value in players hearing different voices. If we're all talking about the same concepts, the same general principles, and it takes, one set of verbiage for it to resonate with a player, I don't want to take that opportunity away from him. So I want to make sure that, generally we're on the same page. We believe in the same things. We have the same core foundational principles, but everybody kind of has their own ability to express it in the way that they want. And because I've seen it so many times, it's like guy goes from, he's in high A and he's struggling, and he goes down to back to the AZL, whatever. And, he gets a different voice, and all of a sudden, even though the person's expressing the same general principles, they hear it in a different way and it clicks, so I don't want to pigeonhole people and take them away from the way that they say it and their version of expressing it. But generally, you got to be on the same page. And that, you're right. It's difficult. It's difficult for sure.
Definitely. And I guess the other thing that you guys have to kind of work with is guys having hitting coaches outside of the organization.
Yeah.
Is that something like how do you work with them? Because obviously, like we have some coaches that will like call our coaches, and some that will like literally dictate and say like this is what you need to do.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of everything.
Yeah. No, I think like that's definitely like everybody has to deal with that now. Everybody has their own hitting coach and everybody has their own, private guy back at home that they've worked with since they could have worked with them since they were 10. In a lot of cases, those people know that player better than I do. In some cases, it happens, and I think that no matter what the situation is, you have to build a relationship with that person, that outside, influence, and you have to understand where they're coming from. You have to understand their terminology, their verbiage. And I think it's, I've heard of there's organizations and, college teams or whatever that discourage you from working with people outside. And I think that's a bad decision. I think if I were a player, I'd be really frustrated if somebody told me you're not allowed to go elsewhere. That would be really, really frustrating to me. If the guy feels the need to go elsewhere, fine. Let's work with that guy, that outside source, make sure that we're on the same page, and so that we can help the player more than, as much as we can. Again, it all comes back to the player, right? Like they're driving the bus, and if they want outside help, we're going to be there to support that.
Yeah, I think that's an awesome way to look at it for sure. Now, going back to like present day. So you have a lot of guys that I'm sure are just like absolutely going nuts, really excited to get back on the field. How are you guys managing still developing your players and still trying them to get ready in hopes that we are going to have a season, June, July, August, something like that?
Yeah. This is a strange, really strange time. We had to start by trying to figure out what equipment people had access to. If you told me a year ago that we would be in a situation where major league hitters are like, I can't find a tee to hit off of, I never even came across, the realm of possibilities for me. But, it started with us trying to figure out, okay, what do people have access to, and where are they geographically? Are they going to be able to get outside, things like that. But from there, trying to structure the program along the lines of what they actually have access to. So we're trying to do that as much as possible. We're really trying to emphasize, the mental side of the game right now, because that's something that everybody can really focus on, regardless of what equipment you have available. We're doing some pitch recognition, vision training type stuff. We're pretty much just trying to hit on everything we possibly can, given our limited access and the players' access to equipment. So it's a weird situation. We're going to have to get pretty creative, but we'll see.
Yeah, that's absolutely crazy to think that like name a major league player, like he might have the same resources in his house than one of our like 12U players.
Right. It's
mind-boggling. Like what kind of stuff are you guys doing right now to work on the mental side of the game? Like, is it articles, podcasts? Is it something internal?
Everything. A little bit of everything. So we've got, the first thing we did was Carson Vitale, our major league field coordinator, started up a little book club thing. So right now we're reading Chop Wood, Carry Water as a group, and we're having like these little Zoom calls just like this where we kind of discuss what we read that week. And it's been great. It's been really, really awesome. Guys are chiming in, giving their 2 cents and seeing how they, what it meant to them. So that's been really cool. We're working on putting together, like I said, there's some pitch recognition programs going on that we've been able to get access to. A lot of the companies are giving free access right now for players, which is great. And so
any recommend for these younger guys?
Yeah. Game Sense is it's a video occlusion app. It's video occlusion's been proven to have benefits, even though it's it's marginal. But if we can get 1% better during this time, then that's a huge win.
Yeah.
So that's a good one. That's a lot of our guys are using that. And there's actually, I think they gave free access to all professional organizations. So there's guys, there's some inter organization competition going. We're working on putting together a little bracket for our guys. So it should be fun. Should be cool.
That'd be cool. Like a May Madness of the
Yep.
Yeah, I'm sure these guys are just like really, really excited to compete, regardless of what it's from.
No doubt.
Like Madden tournaments and horse tournaments now on ESPN. It's crazy.
Everything. Any way to compete, man. These guys are itching for it.
For sure. What kind of advice would you give, the guys that are stuck at home right now from a training standpoint? Obviously, you can just keep it general because, like you said, you don't know exactly what kind of equipment they have at home.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I would just say this is the time to really like hone in on that mental side of the game. Whether it's learning about visualization techniques, imagery, stuff like that. This is a valuable, valuable opportunity. And the visualization stuff is another thing that if there's one thing I could recommend to a player right now, that would probably be it. And the research on visualization is absolutely insane. Like I hadn't really dove into it until, actually when I was heading home from Arizona, one of our players reached out to me. He was like, "Hey, he's talking about his plans for the off season. Well, this coronavirus off season."
Yeah.
And he was saying that visualization was something he really wanted to work on. He asked me if I had anything for him in that realm. And I really didn't. All I had was just, stuff that people had told me in the past
Right.
and stuff that I had heard from other people. And I really dove into the research. And it is so clear. The benefit is so clear. And I mean, there are studies that show there was a basketball free throw study that a lot of people reference where they had a training group, they had a control group, and then they had a visualization group. So the visualization group was not on the court at all. And the training group was practicing, they were shooting for an hour a day. And the training group had, I think it was like a 24% increase in accuracy. And the visualization group had a 23% increase by literally just sitting there
Right.
visualizing themselves shooting free throws. I mean, it's mind blowing. I mean, there's things on muscle growth. You actually can increase your lean muscle mass by visualizing yourself lifting weights. You activate the same neural circuitries that you do from actually deadlifting when you visualize yourself deadlifting. It's mind blowing. I mean, and if there's one thing, like you said, if there's one thing I can prescribe for guys right now, it's dive into that rabbit hole, understand it, and work on it because it'll help you when you get into the season, and it'll help you actually get better right now.
That's awesome. Do you have, a starting point? Because I'm sure a lot of these guys haven't really looked into it. Any recommendations?
I honestly, I would just get on Google, and
Okay.
type in
Just get
visualization in
weird.
sports. Yeah, visualization in sports. There's a lot of really like easy to read articles. Some key things to focus on when you go into it. So if you just Google it, like I said, there's a ton of like really valuable, easy to read resources that'll help you through it a little bit.
That's awesome. So, like when you're talking to your own players about visualization, is it on field? Like I remember Kevin Wilson, like literally taking his players to home plate before anybody gets to the park, and that they're
Yeah.
visualizing, or is it like in the locker room? Or I guess case by case potentially.
Yeah. It can really be anywhere. They say that you can even visualize your training before you go out and do it. There's a very powerful anchoring effect that gets created when you visualize the training that you're going to execute for that day, and then you go out and do it. It kind of gives you this link between the things that are happening in my brain and the things that are happening in reality. But I would say that it really all comes down to the intent that you go into it with. You're going to get out of it what you put in. If you go into it with a half-ass mentality,
Right.
it's not going to work. But if you're able to really commit to it, and the best visualization, the ones that get the best results, are the ones where you are fully immersed in that setting. You're visualizing as many sensory stimuli as you possibly can. You're hearing the crowd. You're seeing the picture. You can tell me who it is, what jersey he's wearing. You can tell me what the day looks like, what the weather looks like, everything. And, like I said, you get out of it what you put in. So the biggest thing I've been trying to encourage our guys to do is really commit to it, really try, because it seems a little bit fairy dusty, and it seemed fairy dusty to me as a player. I'm like, come on. But once I read that research, it's mind blowing. It's powerful stuff. It's been proven time and time again.
Yeah, especially if you're combining like actually practicing and training with that.
Yeah.
All of a
Yeah.
sudden that like 23, 24% gets a lot higher.
Yeah. No, 100%. There's been stuff that shows that it actually creates an additive effect. There was that same study I was talking about with the lean muscle mass. They showed they had a group that did visualization and trained, and that group I think they were 14% higher than the group that just trained.
Yeah.
So if you're doing that and training, that's the perfect mix right there.
That's really cool. That's really cool. So those are really the biggest questions I had. If you guys want to type some questions into the chat, we'll give Jarret a couple more and then let him have his Monday night to himself.
Sweet.
So here we got one. This is kind of a little bit of a riddle. Finish this sentence. Hitting is all about blank.
Commitment, I would say. Commitment.
Commit in what sense?
I would say your in-game process is only as good as your commitment to your external goal. So, whatever that goal may be, it may be hitting a, line drive through the pitcher's head. It might be trying to hit a ball through the batter's eye. If you can't truly commit to that, if you're half-assed about that commitment and you're worried about, in the back of your mind, oh, well, what if he throws a breaking ball? What if he throws a changeup? Whatever, you're screwed. it's over. So, I mean, for me, it really comes down to in-game performance comes down to what is the level of your commitment to your plan? How good is your plan and how committed are you to it?
I really like that. So with like younger guys or really anyone that still, they work really hard, they research, they visualize, they still get on the field and they're like a little bit nervous, a little bit hesitant. What would be your advice to them?
I would say that is completely normal and that you're going to feel nervous and that you're going to feel anxious and that your appraisal of those things is more important than the actual feeling itself. So the way you perceive anxiety, if you get that sensation, you get some butterflies in your stomach and you see it as, oh my God, I'm nervous as hell, I'm about to shit my pants, then yeah, it's not going to be very good. But if you're able to frame that anxiety, that butterfly feeling as excitement, if you're able to shift your mindset, that alone has shown to be extremely, extremely powerful. And so I would say, you know, for those people that are still feeling that, it's completely normal and you're going to feel it for the rest of your life. If you don't feel it, then you don't really care. And if you stop feeling nervous and anxious when you play, like probably shouldn't be playing anymore. So I think it comes down to the way you praise those emotions and the way that you actually perceive them.
No, I think that's a great point. I think as guys, we're always like, oh, I'm not nervous, like I'm a man, but like you said, like the mental part, it's so important. So to be comfortable with admitting like, I'm nervous because I really care, but then getting over that and being more comfortable with yourself. That's really cool. Really cool.
And the other piece of that is just, you need to put yourself in those environments more frequently. When you think about preparation really is just inoculation. Have you been there before? And if you're in these situations, in these high pressure environments and you're creating them in your practice, then when you get there in the game, it feels natural. You know how to appraise those emotions, you know how to deal with them, and you know that you've been there before, which is probably the most important feeling you can create.
Dead on. A lot of good advice for these young guys. We have a couple of tough questions. You can pass if you want to pass, all right?
All right.
In your opinion, who is the prettiest swing of the Mariners?
On the Mariners.
Could go in baseball if you want to not make it as personal.
Yeah, let's go in baseball. I don't want anybody to get buttered.
That's fine. Yeah, I don't want you to get any text after this.
Everybody on the Mariners has a great swing. They're all
Good
amazing
answer.
hitters. Yeah, but I would have to go with Mike Trout. Mike Trout's as good as it gets. When it comes to, when I talk about those technical advantages that people can create, it really comes down to, does your swing path give you a large margin for error, right? So do you have a large timing window, number one? And then number two, do you have an efficient sequence? So number one, are you working in sequence and is it efficient? Is it happening in a tight window? And those two things, they have huge, huge implications for, your in-game performance. If you're maximizing your margin for error and your sequence is efficient enough to delay the commitment of your swing later in ball flight, you've created a massive, massive advantage. And Mike Trout does those things better than anybody. So he's probably my number one.
That's really interesting because I think, and I could be completely wrong, if you take his swing in a cage and you're just watching the actual swing, you're a little different because your job is to evaluate hitters and create them. I don't think most people take Mike Trout.
Really?
I don't think it's the smoothest swing.
Yeah, yeah, you could say that. Aesthetically, it's probably not. Yeah, I would probably say aesthetically, it's not as pleasing as Cody Bellinger, but from an efficiency standpoint, it's as good as it gets. I mean, the way first of all, his swing path is unbelievable. And second of all, his ability to adjust. And I think that comes from his efficiency. It's better than anybody in the game.
I think it'd be really cool to listen to you break down some swings. Not that we have time to do that today, but maybe another time. That would be really interesting.
I would love to.
I might take you up on that one.
Sure.
Let's go one more question and then we'll let you go. So this is a good one. So whether it's one of your guys, whether it's, a younger kid, college guy, do you have any suggestions to help them stay motivated during this, prolonged off season?
Ooh, that's tough. I mean, it's hard for all of us to stay motivated right now. But the only way I could think about that is everybody's going through this together, right? We're all in this. It's a strange situation because we don't have many collective experiences like this in life where everybody's kind of going through the same thing at the same time. And the way that you handle that, you can put yourself so far ahead of the pack because for a fact that there's everybody out there struggling to stay motivated. Everybody out there struggling to wake up and do the work when they don't know when they're going to be able to play again. But if you can step back from the big picture and kind of see that and see the fact that nobody else is going to do the work right now, you have an opportunity to put yourself so far beyond those people. And if that doesn't motivate you, then I don't know what does.
Yeah, I'm pumped. I'm gonna go lift or something. No, but that's so true, because like it doesn't matter if you're rich, poor, you live in the city, the country. Chances are you have about the same resources as every other single person out there.
Right. It's leveled the playing field.
Yeah, exactly. And like you said, we're gonna have 1, 2, 3 months of this, so it's gonna be really obvious who's doing good things each day, because it's really gonna add up.
Yep, for sure.
But really appreciate you coming on. I think we might have to talk about like some tips for like the quarantine beard after we get off here.
This thing's disgusting, man. Disgusting.
I'm glad you said it, not me. No, I'm jealous. But again, Jarret, thanks for everything, man. Stay safe out there.
All right. Thank you. Be safe.
Thank you.